In this video, I'm going to be explaining the TEES outline. And to do this, I've got a variety of resources to show you, including a blank document, the blank document that you'll use right here. And I'm going to go through two examples for this. So the first thing that I want to let you know is that a TEES outline is an acronym. TEES stands for topic sentence, which is the first part. The first E is E for evidence, and that has two parts, the intro phrase and the context, as well as the quote itself. Then the next piece of that is the E for explanation. And this evidence explanation, this EE, repeats itself depending on the amount of evidence that you're providing in your paper. So in this case, we've got a second piece of evidence, which has a second explanation. So the E's are evidence and explanation. And the last part is the S for so what, or synthesis. And I'm going to be walking through those four pieces more specifically now. So the first thing that I want to show you is the explanation for this. So again, the topic sentence is the T, and the topic sentence is the introduction of the main idea for that paragraph. You'll get the topic sentence from your thesis pyramid. So when you guys generated your thesis pyramid, you had a thesis statement, and then you developed two or three or four separate points to support your thesis. And for example, this statement right here, this first point, would be my first topic sentence. That's what the first paragraph will be about. So, for example, the potential for the creation of superbugs or superweeds that are tolerant to pesticides engineered in GMO crops would be devastating to my crops. So this is my main idea for my paragraph. And again, it comes from my first point from my thesis pyramid. So if you do your good thesis pyramid, you will have your topic sentences already drafted right here in point 1, point 2, point 3, etc. So the second part of that is the intro phrase. So the T is for topic sentence, and then we have our first piece of evidence, which is got two parts, the intro phrase, the context, and the quotation itself. If we think about the goal of the context, the goal of the context is to really help your reader know where your quote is coming from. So for example, if I had this random quote, for example, "Yo Adrian," it doesn't really mean anything unless you provide it with context. Remember when Rocky Balboa says in the movie Rocky to his girlfriend, "Yo Adrian," now suddenly this statement has context. The same thing is true with this statement, "I'm the king of the world." Without context, this statement doesn't really mean much. But if I remind you that it's Leonardo DiCaprio in the movie Titanic, when he's standing on the front of the ship saying this, now this statement, "I'm the king of the world," has context. The same thing is true for this one, "Hasta la vista, baby." Who said it and where it comes from? Well, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger playing the Terminator in the movie The Terminator. Let's do one last one, "My precious." "My precious," again, this is without context sort of meaningless, but then you remind your reader that it's Schmeagol saying this phrase talking about the ring in Lord of the Rings. So the context is really who is saying it and where does it come from. So that's what this intro phrase and context is. Help the reader by putting the quote into context, who says it, where it comes from. So in this example, I've got Dr. Ricarda Steinbrecher of the Women's Environmental Network points out that. Now this statement that I got also comes off of my thesis pyramid. My first piece of evidence that I've got down here in the corner, I have my source, and this piece that I highlighted down here, who said it, where it comes from, that becomes my intro phrase. The next piece of this is the quotation itself. We want to provide the actual text from the document, and we can edit that down using an ellipsis if you want to remove some information, as long as it doesn't change the meaning of the quote. So again, to provide the quotation is fairly simple. We just go back to our thesis pyramid and use the quote that you pulled out and put right there. So my intro phrase comes from this, and my quote itself comes from here. So again, you can see that if you have done an effective thesis pyramid, you've got your topic sentences, you've got your intro phrases, you've got your quotes already laid out for yourself. So in this case, we've got this quote: "The unrelated multiple side effects of introduced genes cannot be predicted in advance and are not always visible or detected." So that's my quote. So for the T's, we've got topic sentence, we've got our evidence, which has got the intro phrase and the quote, and then the next E, as I said, is the explanation. The explanation helps your reader by telling them how your quote supports your main idea. Essentially, it's why did you pick it? Why did you choose it? What does it do to support your ideas? You probably want to focus on what individual words mean, how those words prove your point, and maybe how that quote works in connection with another idea. So, for example, you probably in this one may want to focus on what unrelated multiple side effects means, or what an introduced gene means. Okay? And so this is my explanation that I give right here, and the explanation is basically as follows. Scientists would like to think that they are able to test all the possible outcomes of modifying animal and plant genes. To some degree, they are right. They are able to test the effects of their product on their target species and even other species in the environment. However, as Dr. Ricardo Steinbrecher points out, there are side effects that cannot be predicted. We see this kind of problem right now with antibiotics. Because they have become so prevalent, the organisms that we are trying to control have been forced through an artificial evolutionary process. Now we have bacteria that cannot be controlled by first-wave antibiotics because they have adapted and evolved. If this happens in my region where I'm growing crops using organic farming methods, my pest control methods may be jeopardized by these new organisms. So what I did is I tried to explain first of all, what does she mean by unrelated multiple side effects? And to do this, I make the connection to antibiotics. And then I also try and point out how this quote affects my overall idea, which is basically we can't predict the impact that these are going to have on my farming and my pest control methods. Okay? So again, I'm really responding to explain specifically what the quote means, as well as how those words prove your point. Okay? That's an effective explanation. The last piece of this is the so what. The so what is where you synthesize your several pieces of evidence by discussing how they together support your thesis. This is where you explain how your 2 or 3 or 4 pieces of evidence together support your main idea. Okay? So that is essentially how this works. So the so what for this one is synthesizing the quote I just explained and my other quote, which would be this one right here. Okay. What I'm going to do is in the next video I'm going to walk through examples, another specific example, and show you how this so what would play out. So let's look at a second example. In this TEES outline, we have a topic sentence that reads as follows: "As a mother, I'm concerned about the health of my children and the kinds of food they eat." So this is the focus of this paragraph. I'm going to explain, or I should be explaining, why and how this I am concerned about the health of my children and the kinds of food they eat relative to GMOs. So I've got my first piece of evidence, which has its intro phrase and its context, and the specific quote itself. And so I've got my intro phrase, Dr. Martha Herbert, pediatric neurologist, states, and then I've got my quote. You'll notice that the intro phrase and the quote together flow together as one piece of text. Dr. Martha Herbert, a pediatric neurologist, states, today the vast majority of foods in supermarkets contain genetically modified substances whose effects on our health are unknown. What you want to do when you write your intro phrase is you want to get the intro phrase and the quote to work together as one unified and clear idea. So I've got my intro phrase, I've got my quote, my explanation. What do I want my reader to know about this quote? So this is what I say. What Dr. Herbert is trying to say is that GMO foods might pose health risks to certain people. For example, if I'm trying to feed my boys a product that includes GMO ingredients and they are allergic to a gene that has been added to that food, then they may have a very negative reaction to that food. There are two possible reasons why the effects may be unknown. First, the effects may be long-term, and second, that they may not be traceable because the GMO ingredients are not labeled. She is also suggesting that these foods are not adequately tested. Okay. So in this explanation, I help my reader understand what it is that I want them to know and understand about this piece of evidence. My second piece of evidence, I've also got an intro phrase for it. So in this case, the intro phrase reads as follows. Promotional materials for Adventist crop science state the following. And you'll notice again that the intro phrase and the quote flow together as one unified statement. State the following. All of our products, including those based on biotechnology, undergo thorough human, animal, and environmental safety evaluations. In order to be released commercially, they have to obtain the respective regulatory authorization. This involves rigorous governmental safety reviews and approval processes. So that was sort of difficult to understand, I suppose. And so what we need to do for our reader, again, is to explain how does this quote, what does this quote mean, and how does it support your ideas? So this is my explanation. This company is suggesting that their GMO products are adequately tested for safety. And this statement right here comes from right here. All of our products, including those based on biotechnology, undergo thorough human, animal, and environmental safety regulations. So I'm basically interpreting that statement for my reader. As well, I interpret the next part. They make the claim that in order to be released for public use and consumption, they have to pass governmental safety reviews and approval processes. That's me explaining or interpreting the second part of that quote. And then the last piece of my explanation is my sort of commentary on it. It's interesting to note that they are passing some responsibility for safety off onto the government. So I am not only explaining the quote, but also providing some interpretation of what it suggests or what it means. So I've got my two pieces of evidence now, one from Dr. Herbert, one from Adventist Crop Science, and the last piece is the so what. This is where I synthesize my first piece of evidence from Dr. Herbert and my second piece of evidence from Adventist, and I explain how they together support the main idea of this paragraph. I synthesize them, put them together, and discuss them collectively. What larger idea do they suggest? And so this is what I came up with. The question is who I should believe. Do I trust in the opinion of a medical professional whose specialty is the neurological, excuse me, I got a typo there. Do I trust in the opinion of a medical professional whose specialty is the neurological development of children, or the word of a company whose mission it is to sell GMO foods for profit? So that is the question that I am wrestling with. Quote 1 is the medical professional. Quote 2 is the company who's trying to sell these foods. For me, the answer is fairly clear. I do not trust in businesses to tell me that their product is safe. It was only 20 years ago that the tobacco industry was telling us that smoking was safe. Aventis is telling me that governmental regulation will prevent me from being exposed to dangerous things. Government certainly did not do its job protecting us from the dangers of smoking. As a result, I'm forced to believe the opinion of the doctor over the opinion of the company regarding the safety of GMOs. So my so what is me explaining that as a parent, I have concerns about the health of my children and the kinds of food, and I have to listen to the quote-unquote experts. One who's a doctor, one who is trying to sell me this product. And so my so what is explaining how I make that choice when I'm choosing between those. So that's my synthesis. So again, to review, the TEES stands for topic sentence, evidence, explanation, so what. And this tool makes it so that you always have the 4 pieces that your body paragraph should have. The idea for that whole paragraph, the specific details that are supporting your main idea, your explanation of those details, and then your synthesis of those details. So that is the explanation for the TEES outline.